I will try to speak about one of the big four bands of American thrash metal, and until now I made some videos about Metallica, about Megadeth, of course about Slayer, and now comes the turn of Anthrax. And let's be realistic, for me Anthrax is not one of my favorite bands. Of course, for me, if we speak about thrash metal and American thrash metal, first of all, Slayer, they are the leaders of real thrash, of real American thrash. And I agree with many people that maybe inside the big four, if we speak about big four, we would have also another names. In the place of Anthrax, maybe we will come bands as Death Angel, or as Overkill, or as Testament. Okay, there are many bands that also they gave, or Dark Angel, they gave so many things inside the American thrash metal scene. But in any case, Anthrax, they are so important because also that they are one of the bands that they gave to the whole metal scene many different approaches. This is one of the bands that they started to be inside the crossover, and afterwards inside the rap, with rap influences. This thing helped very much the scene of nu metal that came afterwards. So many bands from the nu metal scene, as Korn, as Linkin Park, and etc., they say that one of their influences is Anthrax, and we can understand that. So another thing that I have to say about Anthrax is one of the bands that they have in their beginning 3 members that they were Jewish. Of course, we have Scott Ian Rosenfeld, that he's Jewish. Dan Spitz, that also he's Jewish. Today he's a newborn Christian by himself. He calls himself newborn Christian, but he's Jewish in his origins. And Dan Licker, that also he's Jewish, and he was only in the first album of Anthrax. Afterwards, he made Nuclear Assault. He was also involved in SOD, Stormtroopers of Death, and he is also inside the Brutal Truth and other also bands. And also inside the band we have the drummer Charlie Bernande, that he's also the uncle of Frank Bello, of the bassist of the band. And for many years the guitarist of the band was Rob Caggiano, if I say his name correct, that he left the band one album before their last album, and today he's the guitarist of Volbeat from Denmark. Okay, so if we have to make to speak about periods of the band, first of all we have the first period, and the first period is the first album of the band, the debut album Fistful of Metal with the singer Neil Turbin. Afterwards we have the period and the area of Joey Belladonna, that it starts with the second album Spreading the Disease and continues until the studio album Persistence of Time, or until the last EP with Belladonna, Attack of the Killer's Bees. Afterwards we have the period of John Bush, that it starts from the album Sound of the White Noise and continues until the album We Have Come For You All. And at last we have the last period of the band. They tried to find a new singer after John Bush. In the beginning they brought the singer Dan Nelson. They did made an album with him, and afterwards Joe Belladonna came back to the band. We have a reunion, and until now we have 2 albums with him in these years with Anthrax. So Here I will try to rank their albums from worst to best, and I'm starting with their 11 studio albums. In the 11th place for me comes the album, the 7th album of them of 1995, Stomp 442. In these years, very difficult years for metal, very difficult years for thrash metal, and especially thrash metal from United States. So in these years, many bands, they're trying something new, something else. We can see that also in Slayer became a little bit more hardcore. Metallica, they started to change, first of all with Black Album, afterwards even more with Load and Reload. Megadeth, they changed themselves with albums like Risk. And here we have Anthrax, that they try to make their sound even more groovy, groove metal, or even more influenced by Pantera. And here we have this first album that is very influenced by Pantera style. And for me, this is not exactly Anthrax. And this is also the second album with John Bush in the vocals. In the 10th place for me comes the 8th album of them of 1998, and I speak about the album Volume 8. Volume 8 because maybe it was the 8th album of them. The Threat is Real. Also, the second album that they try to be, even more groove, even more Pantera style. Okay, it's a little bit more good from Stomp 442, and the third album with John Bush. In the 9th place, the 9th album of them, and I'm speaking about the album We Have Come For You, all of 2003. Some people in these years, they said that with this album they came back to their original sound. Not exactly. Not exactly at all. Okay, here they are even more classical metal, a little bit less groove metal, of course, but here this is not the classical Anthrax style. And this is also, unfortunately, the last album with John Bush in the vocals. In the 8th place, a very good album, and it comes here only because the albums that will come afterwards. Their last album of 2016, and speaking about their 11th album, For All Kings, the second album after the union with Belladonna. A very, very, very good album. In the 7th place, the first album after the union with Belladonna, and speaking about their 10th album of 2011, and speaking about the album Worship Music, a very, very special album, and this is the real comeback of Anthrax. And now, in the 6th place for me comes their first album, their debut album of 1984, and I'm speaking about the Fistful of Metal. Fistful of Metal, here this is the only album with Neil Turbin in the vocals. Also today there's a speed metal band by the name Turbin, in the name of this singer. And this is also the only album that Dan Linker was an active member of Anthrax. A very, very, very good album of classical thrash metal with new wave of British heavy metal influences. Something common we can find also in Show No Mercy of Slayer, that also there they have influences by new wave of British heavy metal, and also on the album Kill 'Em All of Metallica, and Killing Is My Business, Business Is Good of Megadeth. But from these 4 debuts of the big 4, for me, first of all comes Kill 'Em All of Metallica, afterwards Show No Mercy of Slayer, afterwards Killing Is My Business and Business Good of Megadeth, and at last comes this album Fistful of Metal with a very good also cover. And here we have also very good songs as for example Metal Thrasing Mad or Soldiers of Metal, and also they made a cover of Alice Cooper, I Am 18. Also here I have the first historical EP of them of 85. I'm speaking about Armed and Dangerous, the EP. In the fifth place for me comes the first album of them with Belladonna, with Joey Belladonna, and it was their second album of 85, and I'm speaking about the album Spreading the Disease. Here we have also the song Armed and Dangerous. For me, it's also the first song of Anthrax that I can connect with it, but also we have also good songs here, Medusa, Gun Ho, Aftershock, Madhouse, very good songs here also. From here, they started to play this style of Anthrax, classical style of thrash metal of Anthrax. In the fourth place, for me comes the album State of Euphoria of 88, their fourth album, also a killer album. Here we have also the song Antisocial, it's also famous, and if I'm not sure, this is the first time that here we have their mascot of their famous mascot of Anthrax here. In the third place, for me comes their fifth album of 1990, and I'm speaking about the album Persistence of Time. This is also a masterpiece, a very good album of them, their last studio album with Belladonna, unfortunately these years, with also very good songs as Belly of the Beast, One Man Stands, Blood, Keep It in the Family, In My World. In any case, a very good album, and also this was the first album of Anthrax that I can connect with it. The first song was Armed and Dangerous, but the first album was this album. And after this album, they had their last EP with Belladonna in these years, the EP of 91, and I'm speaking about the EP Attack of the Killer's Bees. Here also with very famous songs as Milk, Ode to Billy, Bring the Noise, and the whole connection with Public Enemy, I Am the Man, and etc. Now, in the second place comes an album that for me is not only one of the best albums of Anthrax, but this is also a great album of metal, not only of thrash metal, but of whole metal inside the 90s, and I'm speaking about the sixth album of 1993, Sound of White Noise. A so great album, a diamond. Here every song is great. Only for example, Potter's Field, Only, Room for One More, Hypro Glow, Invisible, 1000 Points of Hate, Black Lodge, This Is Not an Exit. Only some examples of these great songs in this album. And also this was the first album that John Bush became their singer. Unfortunately, the three albums afterwards with John Bush, they were not so great, but this album is great. Let's remember how John Bush came to the band. John Bush, he was the singer of Armand Sand from the United States, and he had to be the first singer of he had to be the singer of Metallica, because James Hetfield, he was afraid to be the singer of the band of Metallica, and he was to be only the guitar. So Metallica came to John Bush or Armand Sand. In these years, Armand Sand were even more famous. They were ready with Chrysalis to become a very famous band in the world, and John Bush preferred to be with Armand Sand and not with Metallica. Afterwards, we know the history how it goes on. So some years afterwards, that Joe Belladonna left the band, and Anthrax they want the new singer, and came to John Bush. as John Zazula from Megaforce, from the record, the company of Megaforce, he came to John Bush and he said to him, "You made a mistake with Metallica, and now don't mess it up, go with Anthrax." And for this reason, John Bush came to Anthrax. Another also thing, people, they don't know that between their first singer, Neil Turbin, and their third singer, Joe Belladonna, was another also singer, but they didn't make nothing with him, a singer by the name Matt Fallon, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and now in the first place, for me in the first place, and maybe Sound of the White Noise, it would have been the first place, but in the first place for me comes their more classical Anthrax album of Belladonna era, and I'm speaking about their third album of '87, Among the Living. So great album. This is the real masterpiece of Anthrax. If someone he does know Anthrax and he wants to know what is Anthrax, he has to start with this album, with songs Among the Living, Caught in a Moss, I Am the Law, A Skeleton in the Closet, Indians, One Word. I don't have words. This is the real masterpiece of Anthrax. So from Israel and from Jerusalem, stay metal and stay heavy.